Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're looking at a really important topic for the future of Indian politics. Something that's going to be coming up more and more as we approach the 2026 census.
Yes.
And that is the readjustment of Lok Sabha seats. Now, to be clear, right off the bat, this is not about redrawing boundaries within states.
Right.
That's a separate process called delimitation. What we're looking at is the question of how the total number of parliamentary seats gets divided up among the states.
Okay.
Based on their population. So for our listeners out there, especially if you're tracking current affairs for the UPSC exams,
Yes.
this is going to be a major point of discussion.
Absolutely.
Because the fundamental question is whether states that have higher population growth
Right.
should automatically receive more seats in the parliament,
Okay.
thus giving them more influence in national matters. It's a debate with really big implications for the balance of power across the country.
Yes, and this isn't just a theoretical debate. It's actually mandated by the Constitution.
Right.
Articles 81 and 82 lay out this requirement for the seat allocation to be revisited after each decennial census.
So 2026 may seem like it's kind of a ways off.
Right.
But these discussions and the potential shifts are very much on the horizon. And what makes this particularly fascinating, I think, and potentially a real flashpoint,
Yes.
is this tension
Yes.
between the democratic principle of representation by population and then concerns about fairness
Yeah.
and whether we might be inadvertently rewarding states
Right.
that haven't prioritized population control.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's unpack this.
So to really understand the kind of complexity of this issue,
Yeah.
we need to take a quick look back
I'll take it.
at the history of how Lok Sabha seats have been allocated. The last time that we saw a significant readjustment was way back in the 1970s,
Oh, wow.
based on the 1971 census.
Okay.
So think about that for a second. 1971,
A long time ago.
India's population then was around 550 million.
Fast forward to today, estimates place us at a staggering 1.41 billion in 2025.
Huge.
That's a monumental leap in numbers.
And yet the total number of Lok Sabha seats has remained frozen
Yes.
at 543. That's a pretty striking contrast.
It is.
Why the freeze in the first place?
So the freeze was a deliberate policy decision with a couple of key motivations.
Okay.
Primarily, it was intended to give states that were experiencing rapid population growth time to stabilize the numbers. The idea was to avoid a scenario where states with less effective population control measures would continuously gain more political power simply due to their increasing populations, potentially at the expense of states that were actively working to manage population growth.
So essentially it was a trade-off, slower political growth for those states that are prioritizing population control in exchange for national stability.
Right, it was a temporary measure.
So it was kind of a pause button, gave them some breathing room. But as you pointed out, Article 82 means this pause is coming to an end with the 2026 census.
Yeah, the freeze is thawing.
And the conversation about how to allocate these seats is heating up.
It is.
Okay.
And this is where the geographic aspect of population growth becomes really critical, especially for you following this for your UPSC preparation.
Okay.
So we've seen very different rates of population increase between the northern states and the southern states over the past few decades.
Okay.
Let's look at some specific numbers to illustrate this divide.
Okay.
Uttar Pradesh, for example, had a population of around 83.8 million in 1971. By 2025, that's estimated to have ballooned to 241 million.
Wow.
Similarly, Bihar saw its population rise from 42.1 million to a projected 131 million in the same period.
Those are some massive increases.
They are.
It's hard to grasp the scale of that demographic shift. And what's the picture in the South?
So if we look at a southern state like Kerala, the population grew from 21.4 million in 1971 to about 36 million in 2025. That's still growth, of course. But at around 68%, it's significantly lower than what we've seen in the northern states.
So the southern states, having been more successful in their population control efforts, now face the prospect of their political influence. At a national level shrinking, if this allocation is purely based on population numbers, that must be a major concern for them.
It is a major concern.
What are some of the anxieties being voiced?
So let's consider a hypothetical scenario to really kind of underscore the potential shift in power. If we were to simply apply a formula of, say, roughly one parliamentary constituency for every 1 million people based on current populations, Uttar Pradesh, with its substantial growth, could potentially see its number of seats jump from the current 80 to somewhere in the ballpark of 240.
Wow.
Meanwhile, a state like Kerala, despite its effective governance and population control,
might only gain around 16 additional seats.
So we're talking about a potential situation where
one state
could almost single-handedly dictate the national agenda.
It really highlights the potential for a significant reshaping of political influence at the national level.
And that brings us to this argument for a more equity-based approach.
Yes.
Now, India is described in Article 1 of the Constitution as a union of states. What are the implications of that?
Well, that's a crucial point to consider. The very idea of India as a union of states suggests a federal structure built on the principle of equity among its constituent units. If we allocate seats purely based on population, without taking other factors into account, it could be argued that we're essentially penalizing states that have successfully implemented population control measures and, in a way, rewarding those that haven't.
It almost creates this perverse incentive structure where we might be discouraging
responsible governance in the long run.
Absolutely.
So for our listener preparing for their exams, this tension is really key. How do we reconcile the principle of democratic representation? You know, more people, more representatives, with this very valid concern for equity and fairness to the states that have prioritized certain developmental goals like population stabilization.
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah. What alternative arguments are being put forward?
One potential solution that has been proposed is to use the population growth rate of the state with the lowest growth, which in this case is Kerala at 68%. Since 1971 as a kind of baseline or multiplier for increasing seats across all states.
So under this model, every state would see its representation increase, but that increase would be tied to the growth rate of a state that has been successful in managing its population.
That's right.
How would that play out in terms of actual numbers?
So under such a model, the projections look quite different. For example, Uttar Pradesh, instead of potentially leaping to 240 seats, might end up with around 134. Kerala would see a more significant increase, perhaps going up to 34 seats from its current 20, and Tamil Nadu, similarly, could see its representation increase to around 66 seats from the current 39.
So this approach, it seems to balance population growth with a recognition of and a reward for states that are focused on population stabilization.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging the growth, but also recognizing the efforts made.
It moves beyond just those raw numbers.
Absolutely.
Now, even if we were to increase the total number of Lok Sabha seats, and of course the new parliament building does have the capacity for a larger number, perhaps 800 or more, simply allocating those seats based on raw population figures could still lead to a significant north-south imbalance of political power. So even with a bigger pie, the way we slice it is crucial. What are some of the concerns that remain if we stick to a purely population-centric approach?
So the concerns are significant, and they touch upon the very fabric of our federal structure. Are we inadvertently incentivizing higher fertility rates and potentially less effective governance by giving those regions disproportionately more sagacity? Are we marginalizing states that have shown governance maturity in areas like population control and human development?
These are big questions.
And fundamentally, what impact would this have on the spirit of cooperative federalism? If certain states feel their voices are being diminished due to factors they actively work to address.
These aren't just political calculations.
They're not.
These are questions about the long-term development of India and national unity.
It's about the future of Indian federalism.
And as we're seeing in the news, it's not just an academic discussion.
Not at all.
There are real political undercurrents here.
Absolutely. The political temperature is rising. The Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, has been very vocal in expressing concerns of the southern states. And we saw the recent conclave in Chennai, which brought together leaders from various southern states, as well as Punjab. This really highlights the growing anxiety among these regions about potentially losing political relevance due to a purely population-based reallocation.
So given all these complexities
Right.
and the potential for political friction, what are some concrete ways forward? What are some alternative models or criteria that we could consider beyond just raw population numbers?
So there are several potential paths that could be explored.
Okay.
As we discussed, adopting a fixed growth-based multiplier, like using Kerala's 68% growth
That's
rate,
right.
as a benchmark for all states is one option.
Yeah.
Another approach could be to consider delinking representation entirely, or partially from just population numbers, and to incorporate other performance indicators.
Okay.
This could include metrics related to human development indices, gender ratios, educational attainment, and perhaps even certain economic indicators.
So broaden the lens beyond just the number of people and take into account other aspects of development and governance.
Exactly.
Are there any procedural mechanisms that could help navigate this potentially divisive issue?
Well, convening a dedicated interstate commission, a body specifically composed of representatives from all states, could be a crucial step in fostering dialogue and building consensus.
Yeah, that would give a platform for states to articulate their perspectives, understand the different viewpoints, and try to work collaboratively towards a solution.
Exactly.
This is clearly a very complex and high-stakes issue.
It is.
The upcoming readjustment of Lok Sabha seats after the 2026 census. It's about far more than just arithmetic.
It's fundamentally about the balance of power and the very essence of federalism in India.
How different states are represented in the national legislature, how resources are allocated, the direction of national policy. It really forces us to grapple with this fundamental question of how do we ensure both representation and equity in a diverse and rapidly evolving nation?
Big questions.
And so we arrive at a final thought for you, our listener.
Okay.
As India moves towards this readjustment, how can we best reconcile this democratic principle of one person, one vote with the need to ensure equitable representation for all states and to acknowledge and reward responsible governance within our federal structure? It's a complex question without easy answers, but one that will undoubtedly shape the future of our political landscape. For this deep dive, our primary source of information was The Hindu. They've provided extensive coverage of this important debate. And for you, our listener, keenly following current affairs, especially for those UPSC exams, remember that this issue of Lok Sabha seat readjustment is a crucial topic for your mains preparation, and it has the potential to feature in the prelims as well. We hope this deep dive has provided you with a clearer understanding of the intricacies involved. If you found this discussion valuable and informative, please take a moment to like, subscribe to the deep dive, and leave a comment with any further questions or thoughts. We'd love to continue this conversation and explore this issue further with you.